reading the stories themselves could be from any time. But and that's what I was wondering, the translation, whether it was the translation, they come out the way they do because of the translation. I'm going to read from one of my favorite stories, I think, which is The Mongoose Who Was Wise and Just. And when I read it out to you, just pay attention to, that's why I asked Nitin, when do you think these were written? Because the idea there is very, very contemporary. Okay, so just there.
So let me just preface this story. So this story is part of another story. So what happens in this book is it's like the Panchatantra or the Arabian Nights. There's a story within a story within a story. So the frame story of what he's going to say is there are two crows. A crow called Rajni Datta wants to marry this very beautiful crow called Chandramani. Now this Chandramani, so he goes to Chandramani and says, will you marry me? So Chandramani says, look, I can't marry any crow which comes along. I need to be sure of you. So can you bring me a jewel? One of the Navaratnas, bring me a jewel and then I'll marry you. So he said, can you give me 100 days? So she says, okay, 100 days later, 100 or 90 days, we'll meet at this particular tree. And in the 100 days, he goes to various parts of the world and he has many adventures and he learns many stories. So when he comes back after 100 days, I won't tell you what happens, but he tells all these stories to Chandramani. So one of the stories he's telling Chandramani is this story which he's going to tell.
Knowing that power corrupts its holders, the fathers of many happy realms divided it among different officers so that one can check the other. All in the realm are equally subject to its laws. The chief, the lawmakers themselves, magistrates, soldiers, merchants, and citizens. That is why the wise have said that the Janpadas are superior to kingdoms, for power is so diffused in Janpadas that it cannot corrupt anyone to such an extent that they become a threat to their fellows. A king, on the other hand, is usually free to do what he pleases, and often is above the law. This allows power to corrupt him. But even in the lands where power is checked and the rulers subject to the law, there is a vital force that protects freedom, happiness, and prosperity. That vital force is criticism. Citizens must be alert to the doings of their rulers and not lose a moment to check the smallest transgressions of officials before it is too late. Criticism is like a small prod that keeps even mighty elephants in check. The sharper it is, the less it needs to be used. I'll end here. But the basic idea is that, power corrupts. Now that itself is an old idea, perhaps. But how can you possibly check power? Through criticism. That I'm not sure whether that would be a more contemporary idea, because, if you go back to the days of kings, surely, criticism was not something that many kings would have tolerated.
Yeah, so this book is actually, if you see the frame story, it's set in a place called Chakrapuri, which is a Janapada. A Janapada is not a kingdom, right? Janapada is some kind of a republic, some kind of a place which has accountable government. A lot like Goa, actually, where you have a lot of panchayats. You have more panchayats and doing well in Goa than in any other part of the country. So in a way, it's like that. So what they find is that the kids of that Janapada are not paying attention to their civic duties. So the parents call this crazy guy called Nitina to teach them. And Nitina tells all these stories. So what he's trying to bring out in this particular story is that you must be critical of anyone who's holding power. Even if you like that person. Because the sharper your criticism is, the more that person stays in line. So the story which happens is like this. There is a king called Durguna who's a lion, and he was a notorious. Let me just read this out. Okay, in the middle of the great southern river, there is an island by the name of Auravela. It was ruled by the notorious lion Durguna, whose depredations got worse by the day. The terror he created in the minds of his subjects was the basis of his rule. This he reinforced at regular intervals through arbitrary acts of cruelty and caprice. 4 jackals were his ministers, sidekicks and principal enforcers, carrying out all kinds of atrocities in his name. First, Durguna demanded that he be carried around on the back of an elephant, of the tallest elephant, Balagaja. Then, he forced all the monkeys to wash and clean him every day. All animals were to prostrate themselves when he passed by. Those who failed to do so would be thrown into the river and have their property confiscated. All this they endured until one day Durguna ordered each animal must send him one of its offspring as a special tax. Mother Hare decided enough was enough, and she would not put up with Durguna's misrule anymore. So it's a woman, Mother Hare, who stands against oppression. Others were inspired by her courage and thus began the revolt. The animals marched to Durguna's seat and demanded that he revoke all his oppressive demands. This he refused and threatened to order his enforcers to attack them. So basically, he refuses. Finally, the animals did not move back an inch. That was when Balagajas, the elephant's mother, moved forward and calmly sat down in front of Durguna, shielding his subjects. The tyrant realized that the game was up and promised to mend his ways. The people, the subjects, however, had enough of him and threw him into the river. So the old atrocious ruler has been thrown out after the revolution. After their bad experience with kings, the animals decided that they will elect their leaders instead. That was how Vanaketu the mongoose became the chief of Oravela. He promised a benevolent rule, assuring freedom, equality, and justice for all. For a few months, everybody revelled in the heady atmosphere of the mongoose's administration. Then, one day, the four jackals quietly approached Vanaketu, the new ruler. Bending low in submission, they said they would be honored to serve their new master just as they served the old one. After all, administering a realm was no easy task, and their counsel, skills, and experience would be an invaluable asset to the new chief. Besides, they could also help him with his re-election. Vanaketu thought, these jackals are untrustworthy, but I think they'll be useful to me. So he agreed to employ them. No one raised their voice because they respected Vanaketu and they knew that he was wise and just. Then the jackals suggested that Vanaketu would be able to perform his duties better if he could move faster from place to place. For this to happen, other animals would be required to clear the road whenever he approached. Vanaketu agreed. No one objected because they respected Vanaketu and knew that he was just and wise. Next, the jackals exhorted Anugaja to volunteer to carry Vanaketu on his back. For what a privilege it was for the young elephant to be the leader's mount. And what a privilege it was for the little monkeys to wipe their leader's body clean. No one objected because they respected Vanaketu and they knew that he was just and wise. A thought then occurred to Vanaketu that since he was their chosen leader, perhaps the animals could bow to him to show their respect, not to him but to his high office. No one objected because they respected Vanaketu and they knew that he was just and wise. Then, one day, after a review of the realm's finances, the jackals proposed a special tax on everyone. Each animal was to put at their leader's disposal just one of its offspring every year. Vanaketu agreed. No one objected because they respected Vanaketu and knew that he was just and wise.
I mean, this is a masterful story. About the effect of power. When you have a perfectly reasonable, democratic, decent guy, and becomes exactly like the old guy, right?
Yeah, and this is what happens in this conversation between the two crows who discuss this story. So the crow Chandramani asks him, wasn't it because of these jackals? The four guys who were previously the previous administration who have joined. These are the guys who spoiled the new guy. So what Rajnidatta says is that the jackals are just a manifestation, They are a metaphor for power. Because whether you have the jackals or not, once you have absolute power and no one is criticizing you, you will do this. And that's the adage which, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So you can have, judiciary, parliament, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, separation of powers, administration, etc. All of these are nice designs. But as Ambedkar said, a constitution is only as good as the people called upon to administer it. If the people don't do what they are supposed to do, then the best constitution won't save you. Right? So what here in this particular story is one of the most important duties of the Praja most important duties of citizens is to criticize those in power. Criticism doesn't mean personal attacks. You should do criticism. For example, at Takshashila, we criticize government policy. It's not that you criticize a person for being bad or for being corrupt, etc. Right? You criticize the policy. You say, look, you have introduced maybe a water pricing system. This is bad. These are the problems which this thing has. There are good things also. You mentioned the good things, but also mention the bad. Because the moment you stop criticizing, it goes into their head, and very quickly you get a dramatically negative outcome.
The second story, which I really liked and which I think really resonates with things around us. This is how the cat and the hen set their house on fire. When people create notions of superior and inferior, they sow the seeds of division, discrimination, and oppression. Once created, such notions are perpetuated beyond time or sense or justice. For those who wish to surrender, for who wishes to surrender advantages they get by birth. Once created, such notions destroy the soul of society and create cycles of oppression that are endless unless they are stopped. Nay, we should neither accept nor make any claims of superiority. For if the cat and the hen, and we'll go to the story then, for if the cat and the hen had accepted the principle of equality, their lives would have been longer, if not happy.
Okay, so this story is part of a bigger story where there is a family of frogs which goes on a world tour. So it so happens that in this place called Paripurna, there lived a tribe of frogs whose grand uncle was a grand old frog named Kuntaka. All the frogs lived comfortable, contented, and happy lives, for the pond catered to all their needs. Few ever had a reason to venture far from their home. Of course, the frogs were aware of how big the world was and of the amazing creatures and plants in other parts. It was just that they were not inclined to travel much, with one exception. Once in their lives, all frogs who had come of age were entitled to go on a tour of the entire world. Only those who had the curiosity and the courage took up this adventure. It would take them 7 days and 7 nights to hop their way around the world and back. Upon their return, they would be regarded by everyone as frogs of high esteem. Such frogs wore around their necks the orange shells they found on the other side of the world to remind everyone of their great achievement and exalted status. So, these frogs, they used to go when they became 18 years of age or when they had reached adulthood, the frogs would go. But here's the thing. Having attained the age of majority, Surasundari and her cousins, Jalpada and Gangadatta, were full of enthusiasm for the tour of the world. When the day arrived, they went to the smooth red rock from where the great uncle Kuntaka would send them off. Grave was Kuntaka's face and weighty was his demeanor. Upon learning of their purpose, he said, so he says, this is a big world, there are all dangerous things happening here, so there are so many, you need to be courageous, all of this. Then Surasundari says, oh grand uncle, we have heard, or then he says, when the two of you go, you must be very careful. So Surasundari says, oh grand uncle, we have heard you and are grateful for your warnings. But there are 3 of us who want to go. Then he says, no, only the boys go. Gangadatta and Jalapada go, Surasundari, you don't go. Because it's not the tradition for females to go. He says, you Surasundari must go back home, for it is not tradition for females to go. Besides, my dear young lady, this enterprise is not safe for you. Travel and adventure are the province of males, for they require strength, wit, and courage, not for females, who might not possess these qualities or the capacity to bear pain. Such has been the way of our tribe from time of the very first grand uncle, for good reason I should add. Go back home, young Surasundari, and await the return of your cousins. So basically this frog called Surasundari, she is not allowed to go. And it so happens that she finds a way to go because something happens. So that's when you read the book, you'll find out how she manages to go. So the two cousins actually go out, but she gets to have a much bigger and much richer adventure, and she's actually the heroine of the story. So one of the stories which she encounters is this, which you mentioned. The cat and the hen set the house on fire. Near the great desert, there is a small town by the name of Samadhana, and the outskirts of which there lived a cat named Daruhasta and a hen named Vidala. Okay, so basically the cat and the hen, they live in this house, and one day the cat decides that the cats are superior. He says the cats have 4 limbs. He says, after all, cats are 4-legged creatures who perform very useful and important tasks. We protect the house from vermin and are known to bring good fortune to the inhabitants. That is why we cats are always assigned a place indoors, because we are superior. It appears that the humble place that you have, he tells the hen, is because you are inferior. After all, you have only 2 legs and your wings don't carry you far. Your life needs to be protected from foxes and jackals, and your habits are most unclean. That is why you were meant to live outdoors. Okay, so he tries to lord over the hen. So the hen after a while gets upset, and the hen says, here these hens perform important functions for the household. Hens rid the house of worms and harmful insects. Hens provide food and sustenance to the house. The cats do not. Hens earn money for the household by giving their very lives. Cats do not. Hens guard the house from 4-legged predators by sounding early warning, often at the cost of their very lives. Cats know only how to flee. It is clear that between the cat and the hen, it is the hen that is more important. That is why it is the hen that should have the higher status. Clearly, it is I who deserve the lofty place. So the cat lives in the loft. It is I who deserve the lofty place that you currently occupy. So please vacate. So the hen wants the cat to move out of the loft, and the hen wants to sit there. So they quarrel constantly over this. One night, Daruhasta, who's the cat, decided to finish the matter by burning the hen's hut. It was outside, right? So that so much the better if she was inside it. So he just wants to kill her by burning her. He took a flaming torch and burnt the hut to the ground. When he went inside the house, he was surprised to see Vidala the hen coming down from the loft with a flaming torch in her hand. The smoke from the roof told him that his loft was up in flames. They both rushed out of the house to save themselves from death. Each ordered the other to fetch water from the well to put out the fire. They could not agree on who should take orders, nor when and where to douse the flames. Thus, their house burnt down and became a heap of ashes. Then, in the quiet of the night, they heard the bloodthirsty howls of the approaching predators. So what this story is saying is about this idea of relationships between communities, groups of people, races. You would be seeing this in Israel and Palestine, which is happening now, or in Russia and Ukraine. I mean, it happens internationally, it happens nationally, it happens within a state, it happens within a locality. Sometimes it happens within families also. There are some groups who think that they are good, they are superior, and there are other groups who think that, who are told that they are inferior. But that's not all that happens. In many times when there are revolutions, the one who's at the bottom now says, I'm on top. This is that classic Israel and Palestine thing, right? So, some time ago somebody oppressed me and now I'm on top. When I'm on top, what do? I oppress the other person, right? So there is this cycle of oppression and thing which goes on because people have a sense of I'm superior and inferior. But I always give the example of something like, okay, maybe I'll give, maybe I can use this cup.
Sure.
Is there anything in the cup?
No.
Right? So what happens is, imagine there is a community here. Okay, there's a community here. Maybe this is the cat and this is the hen. The cat is on top and the hen is at the bottom. So people think, oh, this is unfair. So the hen says it's unfair. We have to change it. So the correct way is like this. So the hen is on top. But what happens when the hen is on top? The cat goes to the bottom. So you've repeated the same problem, but now there's a different up and down. So what is justice? Justice is this, when they're both on an equal footing. So I think that is the principle which is trying to be brought out here. That who is superior, who is inferior, and changing the inferior to superior and inferior to superior just changes the cycle and creates this problem for the next generation. So the best thing to do is to be horizontal, right? So that's the story which Surasundari discovers when she talks to somebody else. So Surasundari goes on to have many interesting adventures, including saving the world. So you should read it. It's my favorite. It's my favorite set of stories in the whole book.
Okay, so while reading this story, I just thought, okay, what if I sort of build upon it to illustrate the idea that where you say that I'm superior and you're not, or somebody else says, I'm superior. So imagine the hen and the cat living together, more or less, and getting along just fine. And then the radio is invented, right? And whoever invents the radio, maybe it's the lion, maybe it is somebody else. And this group basically decides, okay, we are all animals here, we are all human beings here. And and this is the sort of hierarchy we should have. These guys, the lion is the most superior, and then there's the elephant, and then there is somebody else, and there is somebody else, and the cat comes here and the hen here. And even though the cats and hens, in the plural, never thought of themselves as much different from each other, they lived next door. But once the radio is invented and they listen to all these ideas on the radio that the cat is superior to the hen, and that's where all hell breaks loose, right? The role of the media, the role of radio, right from the beginning, used for spreading both good ideas and terrible ideas, which lead to these kinds of hostilities.
Yeah. So what I would like, because I mentioned Israel and Palestine in this conversation, because that's a hot topic. Everybody's, when the British were leaving Palestine in 1947-48. There were many options on what should happen later. So, of course, the Israelis, the Jews, and the Arabs said we can't live with each other, so we need to have two different states, Israel and Palestine. So it was called the two-state solution. But when it was put up in United Nations, the Nehru government, India's government, actually opposed this. They were in favor of a one-state solution, which is federal in nature, where both Palestinians and Israelis live in the same state. And of course, this was shot down. It was outvoted. Of course, the two-state solution, Israel's independence was upheld because the Americans and the British were all in favor. But if you look at what the Indian government was trying to do then, this is the Gandhi, it's the ethos of our Indian freedom movement, is that pluralism is a better idea than separation. Pluralism is an idea where people of multiple races, social hierarchies, ethnicities, learn to live together. That living together is not always comfortable, but there is tolerance. It is not comfortable. There are always within a family, we know, I have 3 children, and I can tell you that it's not comfortable for 3 children to even agree on what music should play or what food should be eaten. So there's always tension. So when you can't sort it out within a household, how can you sort it out between Israel and Palestine? So you will have. But the whole idea is that if you believe that the idea of pluralism is important, everybody has an equal right to stay, have an equal claim on the resources, then of course people will adjust based on their levels of tolerance. Some will fight, some will kill, some at the border, some people will feel, we are all living together, but we are still the superior community. You can believe whatever you want, but the law treats you as the same. Legally there is no superior and inferior. So I think that model, and I've written about it recently also, that model of living is the model for the 21st century. Not just for India, but for the whole world. Because if you start going by saying, this national self-determination, we speak this language, we have this God, therefore we want to have our own country. We want to have our own president, our own flag, our own army. It is endless, no? Because let's say you look at Karnataka. Okay, Karnataka says, Kannada is a different language, we want to separate from India because we are a nation. So the Kannada nation separates. But then you realize in Kannada there is Tulu, there is Konkani, there is southern Karnataka which speaks a different type of Kannada, and there is a northern Karnataka which speaks a different type. So you split it into 4. Then within the 4, you realize that within the Konkani there is a Uttara Kannada Konkani and there is a South Kannada Konkani, and then you split. Then you keep splitting, and you keep fighting until you split. There's no end to this, right? So living as a large India-style federation where everybody has equal rights is the way to go. And this is actually, in a way, reflected in this book also, is that we have traditions of pluralism. Pluralism is not invented in 1947. Pluralism is as old as Indian civilization and culture. How many of you know about Jains? Those who know about Jain, can you please? Have you heard of the Jain religion? How many of you heard of the Jain religion? Okay, so when we were in school, most things we know about Jain religion. Are there any Jains here? No, okay. This is quite common, right? It's the smallest minority in the country. When we go to school and we learn about Jains, what are we told about Jains? Jains are fiercely vegetarian, right? They wear a mask sometimes to prevent the germs from going in. There are 2 types of Jains, Shwetambar and Digambar, right? And they worship Lord Mahavir. That's it. Do you know anything more about Jains? No, right? But here's the most interesting thing. The most interesting thing about Jain philosophy is this idea called Anekantavad. Anekantavad means anti-one-sidedness. What the Jains say is that all standpoints, all perspectives are valid and legitimate. You can believe that the world is flat. You can believe in science. You can believe in Ayurveda. You can believe in modern medicine. You can believe in this politician. They believe all gods, all paths are legitimate. Okay? That's why you have the story of the elephant and the blind man and the elephant. That's actually an Anekantavada story. There is an elephant, and each person has only a limited perspective of the whole elephant. Nobody knows what the elephant looks like. Only Lord Mahavir knows, because he is omniscient, right? So the purpose of human existence, if you want, is to rise yourself to a level where you can see the whole elephant. But they accept all philosophies to be legitimate. Nobody is wrong. Only thing they say is you can't claim that only you are right. The Gita, now very interesting, right? Bhagavad Gita, everybody reads Bhagavad Gita and says this is what God told us. The interesting thing about Gita is it is a way to synthesize multiple paths, because at the time when the Gita was being composed, there was some people who believed in bhakti, some people believed in karma, some people believed in yoga, and they were all fighting with each other. So this Krishna, who's this main character in Gita, brings all this together and say all these are the correct ways. They all lead to me. Only stupid people think that they are right. All the leads, of course, one of them is a better way, but all of these lead to me. So I think we have to be thinking in terms of pluralism, which is very, very Indian. It is much more Indian than any other philosophy that I have found in my researches. The idea that all methods are acceptable, we just have to tolerate them. You don't have to accept that they are right. Nobody is asking you to accept that the other side is right. Just tolerate that. Just like how you're tolerating me.
बाबा खंय हांव इतल्या म्हयन्यांनी घरा आयला आनी तूं
जाणा गो शाण्या तुझ्याच खातीर सुटी काडिल्ली पूण आतां अजिबात काय वेळ ना म्हाका
बाबा
अरे राव हे घे व्यवस्थित खा एकटोच खा
होय
वखद घे
हा.
टायमर घे विसरशी
घेता
ना जाल्यार मोबायलाचेर टायमर लाय पळोवया
सायबिणी करता
राव
आता कितें
हे घे
आता ही कित्याक
आज निमणी तारीख व्हडली लायन आसतली बिल्डिंगेचे भायर पावतली अरे कितलो वेळ वतान उबो रावतलो तूं अरे राव हे घे
आता हे कित्याक
अरे कितलो वेळ उबो रावतलो बस मदी मदी अरे आता हांगा कित्याक बसलो तू चल बेगीन लायन केदी व्हडली जातली
अरे ही सगळी सर्कस कित्याक
तुका खबर ना
अगो लायटी बिल भरपाची आज निमणी तारीख
दवर ते सकल
हां
बिल दी. झाले.
बोलले
अशें कशें
गोंय सरकाराची करामत. एका मिनिटान आसा थंयच्यान जायती बिलां भरात. गोवा ऑनलायन सायटीर वचप आनी कंज्युमर डिटेल्स घालप. मागीर UPI, क्रेडिट कार्ड, डेबिट कार्ड, नेट बँकिंग जायत्या पद्दतीन पेमेंट करप. फक्त जाय ते इंटरनेट.
ते तर आमचे कडेन आसाच. तुजो पप्पा दिसभर फेसबुक, व्हॉट्सॲप, युट्यूब हातूंतच आसता. म्हणल्यार आमी दोगांय. तशें जाल्यार सोमते हे उदकाचे बिल
हांगा हाडटे हांव भरता.
आता फक्त लायटीचे आणि उदकाचेच बिल न्हय तर बर्थ सर्टिफिकेट, मॅरेज सर्टिफिकेट, रेसिडेंस सर्टिफिकेट आणि हेर जायत्यो गोष्टी घरा बसल्या बसल्या goaonline.gov.in ह्या सायटीचेर आता सरकारी कचेरींत फावटी मारपाची गरज ना.
आता इनलाईन नाही, आता सगळ्यांक ऑनलाईन.
दरेक गोंयकाराचो आधार. डॉक्टर प्रमोद सावंताचें गोंय सरकार.